This is Hawk from Help Hawk Healing, where we're freeing human hearts. So, welcome to Soaring Saturday Sessions. Today we're discussing narcissistic abuse and its effects. Narcissists need attention as their supply because they feel empty. And they feel horribly empty. They don't feel that there's anything within them at all, which is unfortunate because, to be truthful with you, I've met some very intelligent people who were extremely narcissistic and had a great deal to offer the world. In fact, many of them did, and that's where the term altruistic narcissist comes from. It's a matter of how much emptiness exists within them to the point that they can no longer feel or realize themselves. We're taught that happiness and completion comes from outside of us, and often that completion has to come from outside of the narcissist to the point that we're used by the narcissist as their supply, as if we're a drug. And it's unfortunate because there are a great deal of people that are caught up within this. It's actually quite painful to be involved in, but it's also quite painful for them. And it's kind of sad. When you hear something that resonates with you, just go ahead and touch your heart like this. It's a good thing to acknowledge, and it helps you to feel more of what's going on. Narcissists feel that they cannot be themselves or love themselves, and they look to the rest of the world to fill them up. And the more they look to the rest of the world to fill them up, the less they're actually filled. And it's truly quite painful for them as well as those of us who have been through abuse to have to deal with filling them up, never feeling full, never feeling filled up at all. And to watch them at work is incredible. A lot of them use passive-aggressive manipulation, but a lot of them use blatant aggressive manipulation. And it's just, the tactics are incredible. When this doesn't happen, physical, emotional, mental, psychic abuse can happen. I've dealt with all of it. From parental and from females I was involved with. I've dealt with it all. The amazing thing is when the psychic or spiritual abuse happens, it can be devastating, to say the least, because you realize that someone has cast a spell toward you or something of the sort. With the physical abuse, because that's immediate and goes away, but the mental abuse and the emotional abuse, and they are two different things, can be really just, it's hard to describe how truly physically painful it ends up being, even more so than the physical abuse. As codependents, we're expected to be able to know what they want or what they need without even being told. We're supposed to read their mind. I've literally heard, well, you're supposed to know. Well, you should know. Dating a person is the third date. Well, you should by now know. Excuse me, we've been on 3 dates and I should know by now your personality. It's when they expect you to know what they want and what they need without ever having said a word. A guy I used to work with said, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. Well, that's true. And when they're expecting you to give them what they want and what they need without them ever saying anything, how are you supposed to know? How are you supposed to? And with parents, how are you supposed to live up to an unexpected life hurdle that you don't even know is there? It's really is incipient to, or excuse me, insidious is the word I wished, in this society where everything must come out. Well, you need this, you need that, you need this, you need that. And it's been built in. It's built into the religions, especially. It's built into doctoring. It's built into mental health, which is supposedly a cure for it. It's built into recovery. It's built into everything. So what are we going to do about it, is my question. When we don't comply, we're held responsible and all hell can break loose. And believe me, that sweet, loving person can suddenly assault you driving down the road, and blam, you almost wrecked the car. Well, you assaulted me. Well, you said blah, 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 and you should retain control of the car. No, you should retain control of yourself. It's incredible the amount of damage they can do without ever taking responsibility, with never taking responsibility. Well, if you hadn't done such and such. So either hell or silence, and silence is used as a weapon. It literally is, when you can weaponize silence. Now, there are times when you need to go silent and let the other person know, I'm not saying anything right now. But when it's days or weeks, and you're living in the same house, that's beyond the pale. Withdrawing attention and affection, even their very presence, and then suddenly popping back up. And in many cases, no matter what you do, no matter how you ask, no matter what's going on, they're not going to give you an answer. Well, if you don't know, I'm not telling you. How many times have you heard that? How many times have you heard, well, if you don't know, I'm not telling you. Well, you should know what you did. Well, gee, apparently I woke up, so it's my fault. Okay. Once you empower yourself, it's incredible. But before then, ultimately, there is no pleasing a true narcissist, and the breadcrumbing and gaslighting are common tactics to keep us involved, to keep control, to keep everything around. And in case you didn't know, breadcrumbing is where an underhanded compliment is given every once in a while. Just enough. And gaslighting, well, that's, oh, I wouldn't do that. You're absolutely crazy. I would never do that. Or, that didn't happen that way. You can have a video with audio. Well, I don't know where you got that, because that's not the way I remember it. You can have 100 witnesses. That's not the way I remember it. Or the term comes from the movie Gaslighting, where they had gaslight and the guy would adjust the gaslight and make his wife think she was crazy, or he would move things around. She would be working on something and the scissors, they were right here. Well, honey, I don't know what you're talking about. See, they're in the drawer right where you always leave them. Things like that to make the person think they're going crazy. And ultimately, in a deep-seated sociopathy, they take a severe joy from watching the other person squirm. Now, the ultimate, of course, is the psychopath that will sit and use everything in manipulation for years or decades to see things happen, and may never ever let on to anybody, just sitting back going, look what I did. Look what I got them to do. It's incredible, the depths. Now, narcissists will most likely tell you who they are from the very beginning, especially if you know how to listen. The last relationship I was in was told who I was going to be dropped for. I was told basically when I was going to be dropped. And I was told basically if I hadn't made a phone call before a certain time, someone else would have been picked. And I'm grateful I made that phone call. I'm grateful I sacrificed my own ethic, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't be sitting here now. I'd be involved with someone else in a horrible way or whatever, but I definitely would not have the education or the healing I've gone through, or my abuse recovery method, which is here on YouTube. It wouldn't exist. So I'm grateful for that person. I'm grateful for everyone that's been in my life. I was just as sociopathic as they were. That's the scary thing, is that we attract who and what we are, not who and what we want. Like attracts like, same attracts same. And that was the hardest pill for me to swallow. Because when I started going through and pulling out the wounds and the traumas, I realized I've done this too. I did this to them. Partially in revenge, but not necessarily. So no matter what, they are the victim, the villain, and the hero, and can be all in the same sentence. They can be all of them in the same sentence, and no matter what, they're the ultimate. Anything that's happened, victimizing, they've had it worse. Anything where they're the villain, they've done it worse. Anything where they're the hero, they've done it more. It's always they're more than. They've got to be more than everybody in the room. Excuse me. No matter what, they're always more than in every single way. Oh, your cut was 6 inches and 4 inches deep. Well, my cut was 8 inches and 9 inches deep. Their abuse knows no boundary. Their abuse knows no boundaries, and it has no respect. They have no respect for themselves, so therefore they're not going to give respect, and it knows no boundaries. Like there's, if you tell them a secret, it's going to come out, and usually it's going to come out publicly. Sometimes they will have enough respect for themselves because they've shared enough with you to keep things quiet. Certain things. But more than likely, it's going to come out. It's going to come out publicly. And it's going to come out at the least opportune moment. you're giving a public address to people and like a group of co-friends, and you're discussing a particular item with them, but not giving the attention where it's supposed to be. And then there's an interruption by the narcissist, and you say, well, look, we're discussing this right now. Well, why don't you discuss such and such? Or why don't you discuss when you did such and such? And it's harsh. It's like, really? You're bringing that up in public, but you're bringing that up right now? It can be really amazing. When they decide that they're done with you, they discard their source of supply and will likely move on to another. Not all of them move on to another. A lot of them move on to a new source immediately. However, there are some that strictly prefer to stay alone, especially women with children. This is difficult to watch. It's difficult to co-parent. However, I'm not going to be with someone else because they've got a built-in supply. They might go to other people or friends or whatever like that for a different source to give a break, but ultimately they always return, and the children are the supply. And that's unfortunate because the children don't realize it. The children don't deserve it. What are you supposed to do? You're not going to be able to prove in a court of law, most likely, especially if you're a codependent and an alcoholic, which I was. I was never physically dependent on alcohol or marijuana, but I drank copious amounts and I smoked copious amounts. So how am I going to prove in a court of law that this is going on? Even if I have video evidence, this person's not going to be fit to take care of them because this person is an alcoholic drug user. So what are you going to do? It doesn't make any difference. You could be the best parent in the world. If you're having a few drinks, they're going to use it against you no matter what. Since their feelings come only from the outside, they don't care about others' feelings, and although they can be very good with acting compassionate, they are acting. It's not, there's no true compassion. They often have more compassion for animals, but more than likely, they're going to see people, children, and animals as just another possession, another thing they have, another worshipful being. And this is sad in some ways. Once you learn to let go of emotion, you don't see the sadness so much anymore, as much as you see how painful it's going to be for something else or for someone else. When you accept your responsibility in the relationship and that you are just as narcissistic as they are, wow. And I do mean you go, wow. It hurts even more to admit that than all of the abuse combined, because you never thought you were that way. You never intended to be that way. You never realized you were that way until that moment, and then you go, wow. Wow. It's a really amazing and freeing place when you can do that, when you can say, this is who I am. What am I going to do about it? You're talking about the ultimate responsibility. By keeping their supply addicted to the breadcrumbs, their supply will often put their own cares to the side? How many times have you been working on something important and put it down, maybe to never go back to it again, for the other person's need? And their need might be that big. How many times have you put helping someone to the side for this person's need? How many times have you helped people and the only thing they saw was you didn't get paid? Even their family members. How many times have you put yourself to the side, being a people pleaser for everybody else's need? And I'm not talking about the altruistic Saint Teresa. I'm talking about as soon as this is over, I'm getting drunk or high or whatever. Once they're through with you and you're discarded, the result of being discarded is the feeling of being thrown into an empty well. I mean, you've literally been thrown away, like in a rubbish bin or something like that. Excuse me. And you feel physically like garbage, emotionally, mentally, often psychically. You feel like garbage, and you've been treated like garbage. And just turn away. See ya. And the very next day, they're out with someone. It literally can be like that. Maybe even that night. It can literally be that way. It's very insidious in our culture. And the thing about it is, and this is where I have compassion for them, is they came up in some ways experiencing a much harder childhood than I did, a much harsher childhood than I did. Even when they didn't experience physical abuse, the mental, emotional, and psychic barrage that they endured, and often still endure, because you can sit and watch it from their parents or their siblings, is incredible. So they're dealing with something much harsher than you are. But even so, they can't let go. Sucked back in themselves. So I have a lot of compassion for them because they're hurt people. Hurt people hurt people. Now, psychopaths, they're born without the physical mechanism within their nervous system or within their neural pathways to have a conscience. But sociopaths and narcissists ultimately were born with that particular little mechanism and had it smashed. As it said, psychopaths are born, sociopaths are made. It happens every single day. Now, because of the codependent addiction and supply that the narcissist sparsely deals out, emptiness and a total loss of self are realized by the codependent. Completely empty. Now who am I? You've given yourself away to the point where there is no self. Where are I? Where are my thoughts and emotions? Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? What can I do for me? I've been doing for someone else for so long. Now, one thing about it, I retained a certain matter of independence. There were certain areas where if I'm in the workshop or I'm practicing martial arts or I'm doing spiritual practice, you're not going to interrupt me. But very rarely was there not some situation that came up or if it was spiritual practice especially, there was very rarely some situation that didn't come up during that was held against. Well, if you had been here instead of off doing whatever, this wouldn't have happened. Well, okay. Even working 2 jobs was held against me. Well, if you weren't working 2 jobs, if you had one good job, then I wouldn't have had to do such and such, and this wouldn't happen. Whatever, really, I'm giving you 95% of what I make from 2 jobs, and it's still not enough. And not only that, but if I didn't have to have 2 jobs, and you could have your incredible job and have all the money from that and 95%, and I had one job and could just cater to your need, well, yes, please, Your Majesty. And I realize that's a bit over the top, but I experienced it. Literally experienced it. And I don't feel sad for the other person or other people. I don't feel sad for them. I have compassion for them. I realize how I came up. I realize where I was, and I have compassion, but I don't feel sorry, or I don't feel sadness for them. I don't feel sorry for them. I have no sorrow involved. I'm grateful for every moment, because I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing. I wouldn't have been inspired to this if it hadn't been for what I went through. So thank you to any and all narcissists and sociopaths I've ever dealt with for giving me who I am, for showing me who I am, truly. An infinite spiritual being having a limited human experience. I am enough. I love myself, and I am free and unshakable. And now I recognize. Now then, you'd be surprised, and I was surprised, not anymore, about how often, because of who I am, an outgoing person, I draw a narcissist in. But 9 times out of 10, they immediately turn tail and run. Because they realize within the first 30 seconds to 2 minutes, this ain't happening. If not, they try to play the challenge game. And I'll admit, I played it back. Being a therapist and doing field research, I played it back. I don't do that anymore. I just stopped. What's the point of it? It's not cool, and it is manipulation, and it's using their tactics against them. But, well, I wonder if I did this to this person, what would happen today? I wonder if I said this to this person, what would happen today? And that's just not cool. And I said, okay, forgive me, this isn't right. I didn't say it directly to them, or it would have been another gushing well of all hell breaking loose, but it's just a matter of I did it, and I apologize for it. The belittled, shamed, and often physically beaten codependent usually does not realize the extent of the trauma and will often either move into another codependent relationship or become dependent on alcohol and drugs if they aren't already. And the codependent's looking to fill himself up. Either that or smother the feelings. That's what I was looking to do, not to be filled up so much as to be smothered. To smother the feelings, cram them down, squash them down. No, that's not, those aren't right feelings. Now that I accepted my shadow and realized that everybody has a shadow, that the potential for every human action exists in every human DNA ever, okay, those are right feelings. Or at least they have a right to exist. Those thoughts, those emotions, and those feelings. However, acting on them, expressing them in a negative or destructive way isn't a correct thing to do. We can use them to fuel songs. We can use them to fuel artwork. Some of the greatest works of art, poetry, and songs, even movies and plays, have come from the pain of narcissism or codependency. It's incredible. It's incredible. When the codependent finally realizes their own narcissistic habits, only then can true healing occur. Only once we realize who we are can we truly begin to accept who we are, and can true excuse me, welcome to Kentucky, can true healing take place. It was harsh, and when I go back and read journaling from that time, and I still do healing, I still work on things, but from that particular time period, it didn't necessarily make sense. Still doesn't. I can see where the threads of thoughts or feelings come from that are being written down, but it's just emptiness. A harsh, stark, black emptiness. And it is once we are smelted in that forge and beaten on that anvil that we can become strong and yet flexible, because the ultimate strength in the steel or in the sword is in its flexibility. And before those periods of time, I would have shattered. Now I'm flexible enough and realize my double edge, and I don't have to use it. I can sidestep and move. I'm not saying they don't get under my skin. I'm just saying I can ignore it. Excuse me. While standard therapies provide workable strategies, they can take years to find and heal a root cause wound. In my abuse recovery method, which is a combination of ancient and modern techniques, it's here on YouTube. You can use the introductory module free, please do, or my shadow work integration method. Goes right to it. Hey, what's bothering me? In trance, it goes right to it. Bang. It finds it in the nervous system and releases it. Fills it full of loving light. I'm working on getting the whole method together for the abuse recovery method so that there's more support built into the system, and also so that new beliefs can be put into place. The current version is an introduction, and the expanded version will definitely be a much more complete version and will help to remove the heavy chains of our traumatic past. Help heal those heavy traumatic situations by going to them where they are stuck in the nervous system. Don't be surprised where you find them. Get the energy flowing out and through so that new energy can flow in, and recycle the old energy into the universe. And let those feelings be felt till they're no longer needed to be felt, as well as be released. Please use it. It's here. It's free. I'm working on an expanded version that will be a paid version, and I will let you know. And there's a lot of work going into it, but the last 6 years have gone into the abuse recovery method specifically, not to mention the many years before that of studying everything I could find. It's really had an incredible effect on my life and on me personally. To where people that have known me my whole life look at me and they're like, you're different. And I often get told by family members, I don't like you anymore. Because I'm like, oh, no, you don't get to talk to me that way. Well, I have always talked to me that way, and you don't get to talk to me that way anymore. It's that simple. I was the scapegoat, the black sheep, and I lived up to it. I lived up to it very well. I said, well, if you're going to paint me this way, how about I just add a few more coats? Instead of hold my beer and watch this, it's hand in my beer and watch this. And it literally has gotten to the point where there are people who will not communicate with me. Oh, well. It's because I tell the truth now, as kindly as possible, but I tell the truth now. I've made some peace with some of them, I guess. I thought we'd always just agreed to disagree. Well, no, neither one of us ever discussed the problem with the situation. So agree to disagree? How could you agree to disagree with something you haven't discussed? You know? It really is insidious, and it's generational. It's totally generational. It comes down from our ancestors, and they don't know any better. And it's unfortunate. So what I want you to do is I want you to repeat as many times a day as you can remember, I am enough, I love myself, I am free and unshakable. And your mind will start pulling you into that. I am enough, I love myself, I am free and unshakable. I am free. Thank you for being here. For those who aren't seeing this live, thank you for taking the time to do so. I am enough. I love myself. I am free and unshakable. And I love you too. Namaskar.